Now it's time for the Anchorman podcast with Matt Gaetz and Pearson Sharp.
Welcome back to the Anchorman Show. I'm Matt Gaetz, host of the Matt Gaetz Show here on One American News, and this is our opportunity to have longer discussions about things going on in the country. Another thing people have got their mind on in the financial space right now is taxes. Whenever the calendar turns over to April, we start thinking about the looming April 15th date, and if you're like me, you hate writing that check because you feel like you're funding your own destruction, the government that is so often weaponized against us. Now, there is a claim out there, and we're going to test that claim, that maybe there's a rising defense that citizens have against enforcement actions for taxes. And so I'm joined for this hour with Peymon Mottahedeh, is that right?
Mottahedeh.
Peymon Mottahedeh, and he is the founder and leader of the Freedom Law School. And the Freedom Law School is available for taxpayers who believe that there is another option. Now, I want to get into all of the claims that are made, but first, Peymon, tell me a little about yourself, your background, and how someone like you comes to start a law school of this particular focus.
Well, I came to America in 1977 at age 14 to land in the free home of the brave, as I was very excited. And America is such a vast, rich country. And then in the 1980s, I heard in my economics classes that we're not really a free market economy like we're supposed to be. So I realized that people like me who believe in freedom very strongly, libertarian. So when I became a citizen in 1989, one of the very first things I did is I registered to vote as libertarian and joined the Libertarian Party and became an activist. And a few years later, I heard on a talk radio program, Income Tax is Voluntary. Now, I've been trying to teach Americans that we got to get our country back. Because even back then, I saw the uniparty in action. That unfortunately in our system, you get the vast numbers, but not all, of course you're one of the exceptions, of the politicians out there are forced to make themselves whores of the big banks and corporations who pay for the advertising campaign of politicians.
Totally.
And then when they get in there, they don't represent the voters that voted for them, that represent the people who paid them to get elected. So I heard income tax is voluntary, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. I was a financial planner at the time. And so I thought, okay. But I didn't believe it, because why would anybody file and pay income tax if there's no law? So when I heard this lady on a talk radio in Los Angeles, I called her, went to a meeting, and she proved it to me with the law. Not with opinion and philosophy, which I'm with, because income tax is slavery in my opinion, but with the law as found in the Internal Revenue Code and the Constitution.
So walk me to the provision of the U.S. Constitution that says that income tax is voluntary, because I think most people would hear that and say, well, gosh, my belief is if I don't pay my income taxes, that I'll be in trouble with the IRS and I could go to jail.
Well, the law is very simple. The Founding Fathers were freedom lovers. They just fought a bloody revolution to secure their rights and their freedoms. So when the states created the federal government, they put a provision in there that direct taxing of the people of the states must be done by dividing up the bill according to the states and their populations. The direct taxes must be apportioned. So they taxed property in the early 1800s, many times to raise revenue for the federal government. And when the international bankers wanted to create the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned cartel of banks, in 1913. And they were going to make money out of thin air and lend out to the federal government. They wanted to make sure that the federal government can and will pay the bankers. So they did a game. They proposed the 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which supposedly got rid of this requirement of direct taxes of Americans being apportioned or divided among the states. And they ran a case up through the Supreme Court called Bruce-Shaber, which said the tax is a indirect constitutional tax. Mm-hmm. But what they did is they wrote the law not for the 48 states. They wrote the law for Washington, D.C. and her territories. Because Washington, D.C. is not a state. And the Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government can do what they want in D.C.
So your argument is that the power that government has to collect compulsory taxes, not voluntary taxes, but compulsory taxes, is limited only to non-state geography?
Direct taxes can only be done in this way, and it's written that way. Since 1913, the 48, now 50 states are not listed in the federal tax laws in the definition of the terms United States or state, which based upon that, who is a U.S. citizen, you and I are deceived to believe and assume it's the 50 states, but in law, it was only D.C. and her territories in 1913.
Yeah, I think plenty would say that the reference to the United States would have broader application and would necessarily include the states. But is this the legal foundation that you're using at the Freedom Law School to tell people that taxes is voluntary?
It's one of them because the U.S. Supreme Court in the Bruce-Shaber and Stanton case ruled that the 16th Amendment of the Constitution did not give Congress any new taxing powers. Before the 16th Amendment, everybody knew that federal government cannot directly tax the people of the 50 states, and it still hasn't changed today.
When you say it hasn't changed, has this theory you've presented been tested in the courts and subjected to appellate review?
No. It has not gone to the courts because I discovered this a few years ago by laws being made available on internet for free.
Okay.
So I was able to put the pieces together that before I couldn't make so easily.
So there's certainly risk that a judge, a court, regulatory authority could have a different viewpoint on that Supreme Court case and the jurisdictional overlay, right?
Well, the lower courts, according to the IRS, they don't matter. The IRS says in its own manual that only the laws passed by Congress and Supreme Court are the law.
But enforcement action gets ruled on by lower courts.
By lower courts, correct.
Okay, well, I want to get into that in a moment. But first, going from an immigrant to the country to a doctrinal libertarian to the founder of a law school seems to be quite a journey. Tell us about your education. Are you an attorney?
No, I'm self-taught. I studied business, got my degree in that. And then when I heard about this stuff in 1992, some wonderful patriots, there's a patriot movement in America apparently, underground but above ground, that studied the Constitution. So I thought, wow, I was so ignorant about all this. And my attorney friend and my other friend with a Juris Doctor said, Peymon, in the last month you studied this stuff, you know more about income taxes and the law about it than we do. So I was amazed. I thought, what?
Were these people attorneys? Or?
One of them was an attorney. Okay. The other one is actually a law professor at Chapman College in California.
So you are self-taught. You start this law school. It's not an accredited law school.
Correct.
Are you on a path to accreditation?
No, the purpose of this was to educate me, number one. So I was studying for myself.
Hold on. You started a law school to educate yourself? That's an amazing journey.
No, before that, in 92, I was studying all this stuff and I started teaching classes to my fellow patriots in Orange County, California. So as I did these classes, that I improved upon them, and other people told me, Peymon, you are a good teacher. You're teaching us good stuff. I eventually felt the need to have a law school for the average American. Not to be an attorney, but to know about the Constitution, your rights, your freedoms, and basics of law and procedure so that you don't get railroaded by government.
Well, let's talk about that procedure. I guess law classes in session here. what is the procedure if someone follows what you have laid out and they don't pay taxes? What happens to them?
We follow the law as provided in the Internal Revenue Code and court cases. Basically, that's simple. And I've done this for people. I've taught people at first back then because for many years my goal was to teach myself and others. That's what led to Freedom Law School in 1996. But after several years of doing classes live in my living room and then selling the recordings of it, doing seminars across America, then people came to me repeatedly, said, Peymon, we don't have the time to really study the law like you have. So come and help protect us. So now, for over 24 years, I do. Anything they have with the IRS, I do it myself.
And you do it for other people?
For other people.
Do you worry that a bar association or a prosecutor might accuse you of practicing law without a license?
I'm not doing that. I'm doing all First Amendment, free speech association, assemble. All this is First Amendment.
So when someone brings you their tax return, what do you do with it that falls within that legal definition of speech?
I don't deal with tax returns because tax return is a confession form. I teach people
a confession form?
Yes, because you confess under oath, you swear under penalties of perjury that it's all true, correct, and complete. And by doing that, you open yourself to go to prison for 3 separate crimes. If you don't file, you don't have that problem.
Well, it's a misdemeanor to not file your taxes, and some people get charged with felonies, with a third-degree felony of attempting to deceive the government by not filing taxes.
But for filing, you got 3 separate crimes, and that's 9 years of tax prison, where simple failure to file is only misdemeanor 1 year, as you said.
Is that the advice you give to people, to accept 1 year in prison?
No, I don't tell them that. None of my students have ever gone to prison, and myself openly have not filed and paid any federal income taxes.
Wait, when is the last time you filed?
Back in 1993.
You have not filed since then?
Or paid.
And you've never had the IRS knock at your door?
Oh, sure.
What happened?
I beat them, or they left me alone, or they walked away.
How did that occur?
Because they don't know the law.
The IRS agents?
The IRS agents are not taught law. They just do some procedures. They're low education, low intelligent, someone off the street. They're a bunch of, I hate to say it, but ignorant bureaucrats. They don't know law. In fact, I have.
So the IRS shows up at your door and they say you owe this taxes, and you say I don't owe the taxes because the 16th Amendment process leaves out the states and only includes the geography, and they just give up, or do they ever accuse you of wrongdoing?
In that one occasion that they came up in the late 90s, I said, "Oh, hold on at the door. Let me go get. I'll be right back." Came back with my tape recorder to tape the conversation, and she just walked down the stairs from 3rd floor. I chased after her. Hey, listen, I wanted to talk to you. Go ahead, come back up. You know, I'm here. And she would not even talk to me.
They came to your house?
They came to my house back
to the 3rd floor?
The 3rd floor apartment, yes, that was 1998. And she walked away. So most often IRS...
Have they come back since?
They came to my house one at a time, yes. And I wasn't there.
What year was this?
This was in 2009.
Okay.
And they assessed 13 years of taxes against me.
Right. What was the amount, if you don't mind telling me?
Over $660,000.
Oh, I could see why they would show up.
Yeah. No, that was afterwards.
Okay.
Because they were told to get me. That was a target. Because I was educating American people. So then they just put this on there, and I challenged them. Went to meet with the agent and his manager. They ruled against me. Went to IRS appeals. They ruled against me. Went to tax court.
Yes.
The government lawyer remanded the case back for a new proper hearing. And I presented my case. And the IRS appeals officer and the U.S. tax court zero out and remove all of these page after pages of tax things.
Did the judge issue a final order in that case?
Yes.
In tax court?
It's available on my website. Yes.
And is that on your website?
Yes.
People can look at it? And so people can see a final order
yes.
that a judge issued.
Yes.
That after you not filing taxes for 13 years,
yes.
they said you do not have anything. Was it just retroactive, or do you view this order that a judge issued as giving you forward protections against the IRS?
No, it was, of course, about the years that he showed.
Okay. So did they ever come back, or was that the last you heard from them?
I've been under criminal investigation for over 30 years, Matt. Then and still now under criminal investigation.
Currently under criminal investigation.
Yes. Since 1994, IRS has had me under criminal and or other investigations to stop me from speaking out and exposing to Americans that you are not meant to be a slave. You can be free. Let me educate you. But I found Americans, we've been so brainwashed by the corrupt media and the accounting community to be afraid of the IRS. And that's why people don't even listen. They say, oh no, I'm too afraid, shaking in my boots, I won't even hear it.
They literally say the only two things that are certain are death and taxes. That's probably why people are so afraid. You're under criminal investigation. Does that concern any of the people who seek your guidance or viewpoint? Because most people don't want to be under criminal investigation.
Apparently not, because they know it. I talk about it publicly.
Yeah.
It's on my website. I show the documents.
So you must think the government's a paper tiger. You must think that a government that has been criminally investigating you for years and years has no real intent to charge you with a crime. Is that what you believe?
No, they have the intent. They don't have the ability.
Do you believe that you will be charged with a crime?
They may, just like Trump was charged.
Yeah.
They made foreign charges, but charging and conviction are two different things.
But do you fear being charged?
They may. I don't know. They're going to try to come up with a phony thing, and they'll lose. In fact, one of my students, Joseph Bannister, is a former gun-carrying IRS special agent. He learned from me. He confronted the IRS about it when he was an agent with a book and said, Commissioner, show me where I'm wrong, because I take my oath to uphold the Constitution seriously. And the IRS told him, take a hike.
Wait, hold on. Someone who worked at the IRS.
Yes.
In enforcement.
Yes.
Signed up at the Freedom Law School. And then went back to, were they still employed, or were they a former employee?
He was still working with them.
Went back, confronted them, and they terminated him?
He wrote a book and said, look, we are violating the constitutional laws by imposing this tax on the people of the 50 states that do not owe it. Please show me where I'm wrong about all this stuff, because I take my oath to the Constitution seriously. I need to clear my conscience of this.
Yeah.
They didn't answer him. He went back to debate them from California many times in D.C. Eventually in 2004, they indicted him for some phony made-up tax crime. Without him ever testifying, the jury acquitted him in 2005. And he still hasn't filed income tax. Yes. We both haven't filed all these decades.
I am familiar with something called the sovereign citizen movement. And that movement has as an organizing principle that people are sovereign unto themselves, and things like driver's licenses, auto registration, taxes don't apply to them. Do you consider yourself a part of that movement, and do people who are in that movement find their way to Freedom Law School?
Well, I'm not part of that movement, and I warn against all of these baseless legal theories such as common law versus admiralty jurisdiction arguments, or revocation of election, or Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, you name it, capital letters. There's numerous one of these nonsense, legally baseless arguments out there. In fact, I started back in 92 with the adhesion contract theory, which is wrong. The lady was wrong about something she taught me. But fortunately...
Well, you are using a lot of legal jargon for a non-lawyer. A contract of adhesion, that is something where the party entering into the contract has no real power, that they're forced to accept the terms. And even things like our cell phone bill, right? Our agreement with our internet provider. Those haven't been ruled contracts of adhesion, even though we all know nobody reads the fine print. People are forced to deal with monopolies. So what are you alleging specifically as a contract of adhesion?
No, I'm saying she was saying that, not me.
Okay.
So what I did early on, fortunately, somebody taught me how to go to use the law library, bring out their laws and Supreme Court cases, and read them for myself. And that's what led me to teach others to do the same. I still have a class online for free on how to use the law library.
Well, I wonder if people who sign up for these classes and adopt this theory are concerned that the focus that they will get by not filing taxes could cause harm in their lives. Has anyone that's come through your program had criminal charges against them as a result of your teachings?
No. I've had other people that had previous problems, or IRS was already after them, or they stopped filing with other people with other stuff, theories like you mentioned, nonsense. And yes, those guys have got in trouble or didn't stay with me.
So what you're alleging here is that people who've come through your program, some have faced criminal consequences, or at least investigations and charges, but that's not a consequence of following your strategy. That's a consequence of maybe another filing that they'd made previously, another misattestation, or some other basis for not filing taxes.
Correct.
That's the position you
Correct. For 24 years,
do any of them hold a different view? Do any of the people who have gone to your law school and faced negative consequences blamed you for that?
Here's the record of Freedom Law School. In 2001, rather than focusing on teaching, I made my course for free online, and I started protecting people at the same time that I educated them. And since then, not one of my students who came to me clean, stopped paying income tax with me, followed my procedures, stayed with me, has ever gone to prison for not filing and paying income taxes, nor has the IRS ever taken their paycheck, bank account, or taken their home or property.
Yeah, but they could be under investigation. I wouldn't want that. I would, even if you weren't convicted, I wouldn't want the IRS threatening me, scaring my family. Does that happen to some of the people who use your methods?
Bottom line is, the IRS can investigate and threaten anybody. You cannot stop the police from investigating. But you follow the law and you're safe. That's what matters, and that's what I deliver for our students, because we're standing together for freedom for America. My goal, Matt, is not to help people not to pay income tax for themselves. It's to drain the swamp so that we can have America like in the Constitution, like the Founding Fathers wanted. Freedom again. That's the goal.
Well, I want to get into that. I want to get the legality and process is so interesting. We had to start with that. But I want to now unpack some of the ideological underpinnings of this. You come to this movement of believing that taxes is voluntary through your libertarian worldview. And I'm wondering how many of your the people who take your classes and follow your methods, how many of them are there because of that ideological reason, and what share of them do you think just don't want to pay taxes because everybody hates paying taxes?
It's not because of my worldview. That lady in 92 showed me the actual photocopy of the law on the display. So it's about the law, because I have my own views about this or that tax, but I follow the law. There is no law that requires the people of the 50 United States to file and pay income tax. In fact, I have a $50,000 reward. Anybody can show me in this 12-page brochure where I say no law requires 99% of Americans to file and pay income and payroll taxes. If it's false, $50,000 right now, I'll give it to anybody, because...
Has anyone tried to collect on that? I'm curious.
Not this one, but I had a $300,000 reward, and a professor from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. tried and failed. And it's on my website, freedomlawschool.org, stopthefed.com, and you can see that. And I told them, look, give it another try. I'll double the reward if you get a judge or one of the U.S. attorneys to go with you and show me where I'm wrong. I never tried to do it.
It is an astonishing challenge, and you're a man of incredible confidence here, making some startling claims. And I believe that if everyone followed this method, there would be real risk to them. Now, that risk may not be a conviction. You're right. Most people do hate the IRS, and there are probably sympathies with people. But there are also probably a lot of our viewers right now saying, well, I pay my taxes. How come Peymon is able to not pay his? What do you ever encounter people who resent the fact that you aren't making the contributions financially to our military, our roads, and all the things that are important for the country?
Well, I do pay all the taxes I'm legally owed, and I'm trying to wake up the American people that none of us should pay income tax. Not just me. I'm trying to wake them all up, but the major media doesn't want to talk about this stuff. So that's been my biggest problem for decades. The fact of the matter is that people, when they investigate this, they verify the law. The first thing I say to everybody is follow the law. That's the first of the 7 steps I have for people to be free of the IRS. Deception. Without deception, they make you afraid. Without fear, they rob and control you. So the roads, the schools, the courts, the police, all those are paid by our state and local taxes, not the federal taxes.
What about our military? Don't you feel
military,
bad about non-paying
yes,
for the
but it's way too big, way too wasteful. Back in 2001, before 9/11, an audit showed that they could not account for $2 trillion of the military budget. That was back in 1990s. Now it's a lot more. It's a rat hole of corruption and waste. We don't need to be in all these wars. Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam. We don't need them. We can cut the government down to size by over 90% and we still have too much. Federal government and American people will be prosperous because they get to keep the fruits of their labor. Right now, American people are in debt. They need to catch up. Oil prices going up, gas is going up. People need to keep the money that belongs to them.
We have a lot of viewers in New York and California. Some of them may be wondering what this theory of the law means for state taxes, state income taxes in particular.
Well, most states, like California and New York, base their state income tax on the federal law definition or forms. So if you don't owe any federal income tax, you don't owe state tax either.
Is that what you told people in Orange County, California? Did any of them have any California taxing authorities hold a different view?
Well, it's all on our website. Now, here's the thing. Government corruption, of course, is different thing, just like Epstein files. They're supposed to be released. But Pam Bondi says, well, no, we're going to release it.
Well,
what she has their view doesn't mean she's right. So it doesn't mean have the view that they have a right view.
Okay. But no, I think that the question is not about whether or not the view is right. The question is whether or not any of the people who have followed your methods have encountered state regulators in the tax base who have said that they do owe the taxes.
Well, some states, like California, some of them are really worse than the IRS.
Yeah,
IRS is a broken, disorganized, communist, lazy agency. It's the worst organized federal agency still running on 1960s computers. So, but California Franchise Tax Board is the most aggressive organized. So some of our people in California pay California income tax. That's their choice to do it or not. But the IRS...
California probably has a different view of whether...
Yes, they do. Of course they do. Yeah, because they're communists. They want the money. It's pure and simple. So, but the IRS is a myth. In fact, let me tell you something interesting about that. Back in 2020, Matt, U.S. Treasury auditors wrote a report criticizing the IRS that they're leaving high-income non-filers alone. People that made over $100,000 not being pursued by the IRS.
Since when? I know a lot of people who are.
That's the U.S. Treasury report in May 2020 It's available on my website.
That was a while ago. That was, you know, Biden hired these 87,000 IRS agents in his reconciliation legislation. After all those new IRS agents were hired, did you see a change in how they administered enforcement?
Well, let me correct that first.
Okay.
He did not hire 87,000. He was budgeted to hire 8,700 per year for 10 years. Correct. And guess what? Trump fired all of them, fired everybody who'd been with the IRS a year or two without, you know, kind of being, you know, secure. And a lot of them left. So IRS now has less agents than Biden years has.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
because of Trump. That's one of the good things Trump did.
Yeah, but the agents that are there, when they encounter your followers to this method, you know, what is the type of feedback you've heard from people that they've received from those agents?
They don't encounter because IRS's numbers say that the number of non-filers in America is about 80 million Americans that are legally, IRS says, required to file, but they don't. So think about that, Matt. 80 million Americans, IRS has got to file and don't file a tax return. Are they all in prison or have their paycheck taken? Of course not. So it's a myth. Second thing in this report was, you're going to love this one. They took IRS's information and told the IRS, look, we found in your files, identified 100 richest non-filers who each owe the IRS about $100 million.
What?
Here, go after them.
Yeah.
You know what the IRS response was? Rather than saying, oh, sorry, we're embarrassed. How could we lose, this thing? I mean, you found it in our own data. We knew about these people, but we left them alone. Sorry, we're going to go after them right away. Instead, the IRS refused to commit to going after them.
Why?
Their claim was they don't have enough resources.
Well, those are the rich people.
Ask the IRS.
I may have to, after all of this. I may have to ask them a lot of questions about this. One of the questions I have for you is scale. Because if you had maybe a small group of people adhere to these methods, maybe it wouldn't be worth it for the IRS to chase you down and wave the law in your face and subject you to criminal prosecution. But if like 1 million people did this, if more than that did, you would blow a hole in the federal budget. So talk to me about how many Americans you think are following these methods and what's your goal as far as adoption?
My goal is for American people to wake up and take back America and have the government be limited by the Constitution so that American people can be free. We don't have the Epstein billionaires controlling the politicians and this country. We have a government of, by, and for we the people once again. That is my goal, and it can be done because alternative media like you is giving airtime for people to go to our website, stopthefed.com, and verify everything for themselves. I talked to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I talked to Thomas Massey, other people, and I'm telling you, verify everything I say. Don't believe anything I say, but verify it for yourself because it is so incredibly good, but unbelievable.
There is a theory that I've heard about the Fed. It's actually Chip Roy and I were talking about it when I was in Congress, and Chip said, Matt, it's almost like we have taxes just to maintain the illusion that it's taxes that funds the government. But in the reality, it's the Fed. It's the fact that we print money to buy our own debt at enormous volume through the Fed. And, do you believe that if more people followed your theory, it would actually embolden the Fed as the principal driver of federal funding?
Well, bottom line is both.
Okay.
Yes, the Federal Reserve privately owned does make money out of thin air by fraud and lends it out to government at interest.
I agree
but
with
also
that.
robs the American people. Well, guess what? You know what? If without income tax, inflation will go higher. So this is going to force the politicians to live within the means. Bottom line is that the slavery system needs to end. And the law is on our side. IRS is a broken agency, and it's imploding from within, just like the Soviet Union imploded in 1991.
Yeah, my question is one about scale, though. Talk to me about how many people in America right now are following this system you've described and how sustainable scale is.
I just don't know.
You don't know?
Is
it hundreds, thousands?
I believe it's in over 100,000, I would say.
People that just don't file because they believe in this jurisdictional restriction on the IRS?
Absolutely, yes. Yes. Because, people, some people have a curious mind like me, and when the ladies told me I'll show you by law, I said, fine. I will be only accepting by law. In fact, she said, you got to pay me $40, and I'll give it back to you if I don't prove it to you. I said, you're on, and I let her keep my $40.
If you are criminally charged for this, and I do believe there are the misdemeanors that you mentioned for non-filing, you don't dispute the validity of those federal statutes, right?
The statutes are there.
So if you're charged with a misdemeanor, do you intend to fight that charge? Or
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're not someone who's saying, I'm willing to accept the misdemeanor because that punishment is worth it for not paying my taxes. You would fight a misdemeanor. Would you represent yourself in court?
I always have. I've always beaten the IRS myself in the court. But hold on, there's one thing. You keep using the term my taxes.
Yeah.
There is no my taxes, Matt. There is no your taxes or your audience. The people of the 50 states are not required by law to file and pay federal income taxes. That's a lie. We've been brainwashed for over 100 years. I'm trying to expose.
What would stop Congress from just updating the loophole that you believe you found?
Because it would be unconstitutional. The way it is written right now is completely constitutional where it applies in Washington, D.C., but not in the 50
Do you think
states.
the reason you haven't been charged with a crime is because the IRS is afraid that were you to win, you would start an avalanche that they wouldn't be able to control?
Precisely. In fact, let me tell you my other win against IRS you're going to love. IRS came to a hotel that I did a freedom event, had Congressman Ron Paul, others, about a dozen speakers talking about government corruption, criminality, freedom stuff. And they wanted the records of the hotel, including who attended our meeting by getting the hotel discount rate we had. So what I did...
The IRS did
The IRS's Criminal Investigation Division special agent did that in 06.
I totally understand why.
Yeah, and guess what I did? I didn't just go and petition the courts to quash the summons. I sued that agent personally for violating the First Amendment rights of me, my wife, and our attendees.
And did you win?
I didn't have to. The IRS lawyer forced the IRS special agent to retract the summons and told the judge, let's go home. There's no more summons here.
They withdrew the summons after you
sued that one. Yes.
When the Church of Scientology was being denied a tax-exempt status, they employed a similar strategy. They sued individual agents of the IRS, like personally. They had to fend off tens of thousands of lawsuits. And they ultimately got the tax-exempt status that they had previously denied. Is it part of your strategy here to simply exhaust the IRS?
I wouldn't say that, but in Scientology, what it was, they had planted people inside the IRS who gave them information about IRS corruption, and IRS made a deal for that not to come out.
But
that's what happened
happened. Tens of thousands of individual lawsuits against agents.
Yeah. No, my goal is that for American people to recognize the founding fathers were freedom lovers. They wrote the Constitution in a way that you will not be a slave. And the 16th Amendment did not change anything the way law is written. Right now, still, the people of the 50 states are not required by law to file and pay federal income taxes based upon the laws written by Congress, U.S. Treasury regulations, 1044 instructions, and even U.S. Supreme Court decision. That's all I rely on.
What do you think is the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody who's followed your methods that you're aware of?
That and stayed with me? Nothing.
Well, I mean, there have been some negative consequences. There was a California taxpayer who had to face criminal process as a result.
Richard Grant, before me, was doing stuff with other people.
Okay.
He came to me, and I testified I did some things for him. But he didn't go with me or my lawyer when he was charged. He got his own lawyer, and neither him nor his lawyer worked with me.
Why wouldn't you get a law degree and pass a state bar and do this in the more traditional way where people represent the interests of others?
Because my goal is not to help individuals here and there save more money. My goal is to have America be free and great like the founding fathers envisioned it to be.
So if that came to fruition, because what you're saying there is you are trying to achieve scale. You are not here to create a narrow opening and to fit a few people through that opening of that advantage. You have a destructive mentality toward the largesse of the federal budget. To me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So that's what you want to go after. And if that were to happen, don't you think that the government would, even if it meant change the Constitution, make some alteration? Or do you really believe that your system achieving scale would result in lower spending?
My goal is to restore freedom, not destructive, restore America to its greatness that this deep state, corrupt government, Epstein billionaire gang has taken away from the average American.
Well, Epstein filed his taxes.
What's that?
Epstein filed his taxes.
Well, he didn't owe it. Just like you and I don't owe income tax. Again, first thing I teach people is the law verified at stopthefed.com for free.
Okay, so we've talked about the negative, but I want to talk about the positive now. What have you heard back from people who followed your methods when they don't file taxes for years and things go well for them? Presumably that's happened to some.
To everybody.
Okay.
None of my people have gone to prison or lost any money to the IRS if they stayed with me.
How does their life change for the better?
They got more money to pay off their bills, to not have to borrow, have nicer homes, cars, vacations, better quality food. What else can get you with more money?
Do you think people tell their friends about this if it works for them?
Many people do. Some people don't. And the biggest problem is people tell me, Peymon, they all don't believe it. They think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't get the jab. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, they say, I don't believe all this stuff. You know, so the problem is most Americans have been successfully brainwashed.
I'm one of them. I will pay my taxes on the 15th. I will write the check and I will send it in. One, because I do believe that they would probably do harm to my family if I didn't. And I also I feel a duty to pay for our military and some of the things. Now, at the same time, I probably share a lot of the frustrations of your libertarian followers that when I see the fraud in Minnesota, when I see what you're right about with the military not able to pass audits, when I see the way in California in particular, every government system is bilked. I want to make that better, but I've chosen to try to make that better by improving those government systems, not by just starving the beast. You seem to want to starve the beast. What's next in your plan?
Well, you know, when Marjorie Taylor Greene in December 30th said that voting is not working, it's a uniparty.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for over 30 years. We need to defund them like the founding fathers refused to pay 3% tea tax that they legally owed to the king. But what did the colonists do? They said, we're going to keep that money and send it to George Washington and Company. And because they did that, we have this great Republic America, the greatest place on earth ever existed is right here. So now we have to follow the founding fathers' example. Don't risk your life or property or sacred honor or everything. No. All you got to do is stop paying your enemies, the beast who have taken over, and elect Matt. When you didn't run again, I was disappointed because I want to support you. We could use super PAC called Restore Freedom. We're going to make Matt not just millions, tens, hundreds of millions, and billions to elect people like, you know, Thomas Massey, you, Marjorie Taylor Greene, to go actually win and take back our government from these people who are whores of the Epstein billionaire gang. That's my goal, is to take America back. And I think it's achievable.
Certainly with any organization, impacting the funding for that organization gets a lot of attention and it gets a lot of focus. And I don't know if that's the way to win the country back. I certainly have my doubts. The people who do this, is this all online? Do you ever get together with others who follow these methods? Or is it something where people find you on the internet and proceed?
It's all online. StopTheFed.com and take the 7 steps to free yourself. But I tell you, step 2 and 3 are the most important because people got to recognize that 1040 form is a confession form. So what I invite you to do,
you're right.
Matt,
well, that's the thing that doesn't sound weird about this. You are correct that the attestations that a taxpayer makes on that form are oftentimes hooks into you regarding the legitimacy and the background and the documentation for everything in there. And so I have heard people say, because of their unique circumstances, they would rather have the misdemeanor than have a potential felony if they get something wrong. And they work through getting that right. But that is different than what you are saying. No,
what I'm saying is that what you ought to do, Matt, is file for an extension before April 15th and investigate and verify everything I'm saying. Once you've signed a 1040 form, I cannot get you out of that confession. You put the rope around your neck and give it to the IRS. And people have called me before. Peymon, I just heard you, and I filed my tax return yesterday. Can you get me out of it? And I say, sorry, I can't do that. It's irreversible when under penalty of perjury you swear you owe the IRS money, you expect the IRS to let you have all expense and deductions.
What does America look like in 5 years if this is adopted at scale, in your view? Give me a vision for Peymon's America after voluntary taxpayers stop paying.
America will be a country where we have a large middle class, where people can afford to have a decent life, where they can take care of their family, where they got some savings, okay, when they can have homes, okay, where they can eat better food because they can afford to eat better food. The way they want their life, they have that freedom. And we will not be all over the world being policemen in the world, wasting money and lives of our soldiers in all these wars. You know, we're focused on America, and America is going to be really a beacon of hope, an example for the world to follow once again.
Peymon, I did not expect this conversation to go this way. I sort of wondered whether or not there was any intellectual underpinning to this, or whether or not you were just an exquisite salesman. I think your legal theories are novel, but it's very clear you've thought about them for a long time, and it's very clear you have an ideology, and you have looked at this. I'm shocked that they haven't tried to throw you in jail yet. They may, but you also don't strike me as someone who's very afraid of that. You have a certain come at me bro energy about this, where a determination with precedential value could be your ultimate vindication if,
you know why?
if they were to do that.
Because in Iran, we could not criticize the king, Shah of Iran. You could be jailed, tortured, summary execution for criticizing a king. So America, with free speech, all these rights we have, like jury trial, I think, wow. In fact, the Constitution says our rights come from God, not from government. Whoa, that is huge. So I thought, well, Americans, I verified the law. Don't believe me, look at it, verify it for yourself. I did. And just open your mouth and think for yourself. That's all I invite people to do. Look, read, think for yourself. Do not believe me, the government, or anybody out there. And with that process, we can have America be a free country once again. That is why I'm not afraid, because you know what, Matt? I said to my friends back in 95, they said to my friends, Peymon, if you ever get big, they're going to come after you. They're going to shoot at you.
I'm shocked they haven't.
They shoot at you. You know what I told them? Let them do it.
Yeah.
And you know what? For over 30 years, I've been under criminal investigation. And guess what? They don't want to indict me for not filing and paying federal income taxes. They're looking for some little technicality on something I've done and get me on that, like they tried with Joe Bannister, the former gun-carrying IRS agent, when they put him on trial. They did not charge him.
I hope you're not a mobster. They had to get the mobsters for not paying taxes, and maybe they get the tax avoiders for being mobsters. Who knows? But you make a compelling point that if your conduct has remained the same for more than a decade, and if there's broad awareness of that conduct, you're not hiding. You're literally here on our program talking openly about it, which in a way validates your point that you're not afraid, because if you were, you would not be here. They haven't charged you.
In fact, we have petitions for free on our website at stopthefed.com to send your congressman law spelled out, quoted, and attached. Say, look, show me where I'm wrong on this. And you know how many congressmen have shown us wrong? We've done them thousands of times. 0 times has one lawmaker shown us that we are wrong because we're right.
Well, this former lawmaker is not in a position to do that, but I am going to pay my taxes. Peymon, thank you so much for joining us. The Freedom Law School is the name of your organization. It's not an accredited law school, but you say that it's available for those who want to learn about your methods and follow.
They want to investigate for themselves to restore freedom, be free. Check it out for yourself. Read and think for yourself.
Peymon, thanks so much for joining me on Anchorman. I've truly enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Likewise.
And we'll be back next week. Thank you all so much.